Welcome to Risky Thoughts with Rob and Roy.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Roy. Today we're going to be talking about an experience that I had some time ago. I used to be a supervisor of like a kind of, I don't know, I want to give too much information, but I was a supervisor and I had a lot of young, like 19-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-olds kind of like under my command. There was a new manager that came in, and the guy was like, he was like an older Caucasian dude, and he was I could tell right off the bat, and we as men, we kind of suss out other men very quickly. You know, we're looking and we're like, who is this guy? Obviously, these guys are like kind of all just like doodling around, doing nothing, and I went up to the kids, right, and I said, hey, look at this guy. This guy's our new, manager. I can tell he's a tough guy right off the bat, right? And I want you guys, because you guys are part of my department, to give this guy a very solid handshake. So I said, give me a handshake, right? And they're young kids, and literally nowadays the kids, they'll daps you with like the side of their arm, and it's so light, right? I used to work on a construction site, and I was dealing with a lot of tough guys, a lot of, you know, old school, like work hard. I want to see how much you can hold. What's your grip on the shit that you have? So these guys, they kind of like they grazed my hand, and like I don't know, like even right now, and you guys picture it, like a slithery kind of like light handshake. It's just disgusting, in my opinion. It's actually absolutely disgusting. Like it makes me feel a certain way. And the place I first learned how to do a handshake was with you and your bosses, and they were big shots, building huge buildings and shit like that. It's a men dominated field, right? And I gave the guy a handshake, and he made me give him a handshake 3 times, because he's just like, bro,
Not
like
good enough.
like he gave me a look, like he's just like, bro, like are you serious? Like, you know what I mean? He's like, no, just give it to me again. And then our friend from Calgary, a really rough dude, same thing. But I grew up in the kind of suburbs in Markham, Scarborough, and like this is how we used to do it. But I started to quickly realize like it's a very weak thing. Like when you have an opportunity to show strength, why not? So through a handshake, and I just want to bring up this topic because I was thinking about COVID, and people can't handshake anymore, and there's definitely something lost there. Like I think back to like the primal times of gorillas and monkeys. Like once again, like I am very like kind of fundamentalist type of view. People like Elon Musk share the same type of view. Like if you can rationalize things through first principles, like you're gonna get a lot further, and you're gonna get a lot better of an answer. And when you look at Elon Musk and he talks about things, he's always using like deltas and graphs and going back and going back and going back. It's a hard thing because there's so much unknown, but in reality, once again, we're just monkeys. Our upper bodies are like big, and I'm definitely a naturalist in that sense. So I told these guys to give him a hard handshake, and one by one, they're like, "Hey," and I want you to give a little bit of pep when you say hello, right? Because this is my team, right? Like I want to know like who, I want to let him know who's the boss, right?
Yeah.
And one at a time, they're giving him a hard hand, and I saw them like just like young kids. Are so cute. They're like handshaking each other like nonstop before they could. And then finally he comes out, and literally the look on his eyes is he looked at me instantly.
Like, you got a hell of a team here.
Exactly. It's like these kids, they're like boys, but they can. I know. Wow. Holy shit! I did not expect that from these kids.
Well, the handshake is the first moment of introduction to sort of share your identity through whatever mechanism is at your fingertips. Literally, no pun intended.
Yeah.
And the handshake does that. That is the representation of your character. I mean, of course, your body language, the choice of words that you use, the tone of your voice, eye contact, another part of it, and then, of course, the physical grip of the handshake.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, the handshake being a strong, firm, tighter grip, eye contact, presents a far more confident individual, right? Yeah. And even in my line of work now, because when you had met my boss, we're going back like 10 years ago, of course, and we were the kids
Yeah,
basically then.
absolutely. Yeah, that's
And
true.
it may even have been 15 years ago. I don't really remember, but um, yeah, like, I went through the same experience, exact same experience that you did with the same character that shook your hand. Did the same thing to me when I first met him, and now that I'm in a more senior role in my industry, and people introduce themselves to me, particularly on construction sites, you know, if they don't present themselves with that firm handshake, there is this subconscious like, ugh, what a fluff. Like I don't
Yeah,
want to. I'm gonna run over this kid,
yeah,
and he has no idea what's coming
yeah.
because clearly he's got no spine when he comes to, presenting himself. So I have an opportunity here to crush him. And like I know the terminology saying crushing him is sort of symbolized through that handshake moment,
Yeah,
right? Because you can literally physically crush their hand.
yeah,
But it's obviously an allusion to I can crush this person through other means and methods,
absolutely,
right? Being more psychological or whatever the case is.
absolutely.
So, and I think anyone that takes business 101 in the real world will be taught this same lesson about first impressions.
Hmm.
And the handshake says a lot about that. And I know that before we turned the microphone on, we were sort of going down a road of talking about the evolution or what's the word I'm looking for here? The growth, the path of growth from boyhood to manhood,
Hmm.
and understanding sort of the stuff that you learn along the way, and sorting through and filtering out what you should consider to be important and carry with you, and what is stuff that is frivolous and can be left behind. And that journey takes a long, long time. And I think men really don't get to their true adult self until their late 20s nowadays. I think this is like a reference stat that people use. I don't know what the actual age is, but I
Maybe
think that,
even later. I mean,
yeah, even the
yeah,
early 30s, maturity is the word I'm
yeah,
looking for here. You reach full maturity
yeah.
of who you are. Your identity reaches maturity, in somewhere in that range of late 20s to early 30s.
Hmm.
Um, and the path to get to that point in your life is a hell of a path. You go through so many different things, and this was one little experience that
Yeah.
obviously left. It definitely resonated with you.
It
Obviously,
definitely burned something in my head.
yeah.
My brain said, "This is important." Just a
So
handshake.
so let's try to unpack the idea of like what that journey looks like. What do you think are the milestone markers that are super important? Because you've said yourself on this podcast, I don't know if you've said it on this episode. I know in previous episodes you've mentioned that you are, you consider yourself to be a mentor to many people, many young men who are in their late teens, early 20s, and
Hmm.
you like to share your experiences and wisdom with them as an opportunity for them to experience, to get some guidance, I guess, and sort of how to carry themselves, etc.
Yeah.
Sometimes through some mistakes that you've made, and you share those with them, and sometimes it's just straight advice, like this is what I think you should do, like the
Hmm.
handshake.
Hmm.
And I do want to start the conversation by talking about what does it mean to be a boy, and what does it mean to be a man. Let's define those two identities clearly,
Yeah.
and then we can sort of speak to how the evolution happens from boy to man. And I think my initial take on what it means to be a boy, and in today's day and age, what does it even mean to be a boy? Because this whole idea of gender fluidity, etc. But traditional boy,
Yeah.
I think, is, the stereotypical thought of a young boy is a reckless, aggressive, sort of
Playful.
jovial, yeah,
Yeah.
kind of character who's, out to experience as much as possible.
Yeah.
My son's 1, and he's just over 1 years old now, and he's definitely very quickly accelerating into that process of wanting to learn everything and touch everything
Hmm.
and break everything. And like his favorite activity is going into his toy chest and just throwing shit everywhere.
Yeah.
He takes his toys out one at a time and he just throws it across the room. Like that's literally his favorite activity.
Yeah.
And I think it's hilarious because I think it perfectly symbolizes what a boy is,
Yeah.
right? And I think this is a very high level, right, resolution in terms of what the definition is. I think the representation of a man is not much different than the boy.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is that he's learned his boundaries and he's accepted responsibility. That's another part of the boy that I forgot to mention, is that they're very irresponsible.
You're right.
And I think the man learns to tame that irresponsibility,
Mm-hmm.
converts it into a more productive energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he uses his energy effectively and efficiently, sort of to optimize his responsibilities.
Right.
And a man is truly a man once he is able to confidently say that he is able to handle his responsibilities. That's my interpretation of a boy and a man. Um, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I would like to eventually go into sort of understanding that transition. So,
Yeah, like I think you said it. You said most of it there. Boys are typically irresponsible. I think there's some. It's kind of it's a very broad. Like there's lots
super
of
high.
yeah lots of fields of thought here. There is a book. I think it's called The King, the Magician, the Lover, and the Warrior, I think. And these are all like four archetypical kind of goals of a man. They're four quadrants. Like there is the man who's also a lover, and he's compassionate. He's empathetic. Um, and then ultimately there's a warrior who's kind of steadfast with his responsibility, and there's a king, right? But if you really pull back and on these in each of these kind of continuums, you start to see characteristics of the boy. You see like you know there's a boy who's a lover, right? And maybe he got rejected when he's 10 years old, and he kind of falls into this dreamlike state, and he's just always dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
So dreaming is, I think, one part of a boy, right? He's just a dreamer, right? You've got like the king who's been given everything, and he's just can become like he's setting himself up to be like a tyrant of some sort. And this is like a Carl Jungian type of explanation, but once again, you, you look like a Joffrey, like
Mm-hmm.
from Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like once again, a boy, right? No real responsibility, just kind of wants things. You know, Earl Nightingale, and I'm gonna refer to him, like a lot of boys. What I notice is that they think they're going to one day drive like a Ferrari, or they're gonna own the world. But I think the statistics on that is like out of 100 of them, one of them will actually achieve that. But we all, as boys and men, have these dreams that things are going to be better, and one day we're going to um, like own the world, right? But you know, it's a very boyish thing when you lack the experience, and trying to go down these like
I think okay. So what I like the way that you put that is that so because where my mind starts to go is the boy is full of ambition.
mm-hmm,
The man's responsibility is to convert that ambition into a reality.
right,
And I think that the process of transitioning from boy to man is learning how to do that, learning how to convert your ambitions into realities.
right,
And I think that the men, to use the term loosely, so the males who are older that should be at a point of being men
mm-hmm,
that are not capable of being responsible enough to convert ambitions into reality are looked at in our society as being less than men, right? Like you're not a man if you can't, you know, care for your wife and child. You're not a
yeah,
man if you can't pay your bills. And I mean, where it becomes evident is when you're going into the world to select a partner and a mate. You have a far less likelihood. You have a far lower probability, sorry, of finding a partner who's willing to accept you, because if you can't do these things, then what good are you? Like, you have no contribution to the household. And so, and what's very interesting is, I think today more than ever, and we said that 27 to late 20s to early 30s is that transition point. Today,
Mm-hmm.
my parents had two kids, a house, job, two cars. At 27, their life was already like,
Yeah.
well into the process of being a full nuclear household,
Right.
two kids, you know what I mean? Like the, and today that's not the case. It's not even close to the case. Like, I think men became men at younger ages in the earlier generations, and men become men now in later generations. And I don't necessarily want to go into why I believe that is the case, but it is an observation that I'm making. And I think, I mean, we're kind of going to have to talk about it, because the whole idea of that journey on how to go from being an ambitious person to a successful person, I think, is, relative to, sort of when you have certain life experiences that allow you to progress. Like, so what I'm trying to get at essentially is, today, we socially accept the coddling of younger generations,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
children, for a longer period of time,
Right.
where we don't put responsibility on kids at younger ages.
Mm-hmm.
That's one problem. I think the second thing is that, um, we are generally going through secondary levels of education. Right? We're going More and more people are going to college or university, and that slows down the clock too,
Yeah.
because when you're in university, it is a part of the passage into understanding responsibility.
Yeah.
But parents were kind of like thrown into the deep end, where it's like, you're not. They didn't go to university as often. They had to start working sooner. They
Right.
had to. There was an expectation to have a house sooner, a family sooner,
Yeah.
and you couldn't do that. If you were going to go to school, how could you possibly support a family while you're not working but paying bills to go to university? It's just not realistic. So I think that has contributed to the shift, and to the pushback of when this sort of evolution is taking place. But just to get a little more specific, I want to ask you a question about your history, particularly, and I'll give you my experiences after you give me yours here. But when you were younger, when you were, I don't know, 8, 9, what was it like in the household of Roy, in terms of the teachings from your parents? Like, what wisdom was being shared with Roy, and what lessons were being taught to Roy at that age?
Um, that's a really tough question to answer. I can just say that there was definitely a lack of like male role model. Now, it's not that my dad wasn't a man. It's just that the teaching of his, because obviously, of course, he survived and he provided, and but the because of the amount of time and that people had to spend working, there was not enough time to really guide like me and my siblings. Like, we turned out as like, we're pretty much like feral children, like, essentially. um and from the actual household, it's the tools used in India are a lot different for a man here, right? So there's a lot of tools that are stripped away, and that causes a lot of men in our culture, right, in our ethnicities, to not be as effective in training and teaching children, right? And just to be like really forthcoming, um, there's definitely a power imbalance that happens right off the bat when from India to Canada, right? And the men take a lesser role here. Period. And it's very, it kind of speaks to the whole crisis of parenting. Um, they're not as aggressive. They're not as they're kind of more docile, and you know um, it's just not conducive to raising male children. There's a lot of stuff lost a lot of traditions lost when you come here. So in my household, there was very little. And then I go into a school where there's maybe perhaps one or two male teachers, where I learn an exponential amount, right? In fact, my male teachers in high school were the ones that, even just from reading Shakespeare, and I forgot who it was, and I'm gonna sound like an idiot here. I think it was Hamlet. It was King Hamlet, right?
King Lear, and then there was Hamlet.
Hamlet was a king, though, right?
I actually don't remember, to be honest with you.
Okay, well, there's one Caesar, Julius Caesar.
He
Yeah,
was the
there you
king.
go. So there's one moment where my teacher, he's a male, and he's reading out like how on the dying breath of the king out in the field, he's crying to his mother. Like, hearing that from a man, it permeates your soul, because it's just like, you've heard that trope where it's just like men just cry about everything. He hurt his fucking finger and he's probably crying like a little, whatever it is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And but just hearing that from him, from his experience, that like, bro, this is true. Like, you know, men are not good with pain. We can endure a lot of stress, but when it comes to pain, like,
Low
we're like
tolerance.
little boys, right?
Right.
So that part of a man doesn't really leave, and through those, it's very inspiring for young men who are actually listening, looking for a role model. Obviously, people are not listening, but you got this one kid named Roy in the class just listening to every word, because it's like, holy shit, this is all I'm getting. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I was aware, going onto the job sites, I learned from those men. What I'm supposed to do, responsibility, and like, don't take fucking shortcuts, kid. Like, and also that urge to mentor. Like, they didn't have to mentor me, but they just saw like this 20-year-old kid walking around, like, just a very nice, and you're too nice, bro. You know, um, and just from these lessons, I'm giving it to more kids with perhaps like parents that are not fully aware. Like, I've spent a long time reading, listening to other men talk about these problems that we're having as a culture, and through that, I'm having it with some of these kids,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm seeing very quickly that a 19-year-old that comes in and he's working and he's just, you know, not doing any work, and I have a conversation with him, and I say, like, what you're doing here is you're trading time for money. Like, this time is gone. You can't go back.
Right.
But what you could do is you can actually try here on this team and try to push yourself. And I guarantee you, people will notice. Other men will notice. Women will notice that you're working hard. Most of the time, they come back the next day and they're fully energized, because my words are permeating deep within them.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be my strategy. Other people can be a harder approach, but it's giving a message to guys that, like, listen, there's meaning in this shit job of yours. There's a lot of meaning. Like, there's a lot. Like, obviously it makes me look good, but there's a lot of meaning for you. And one thing is, it's like, I never treat, there is this narcissistic version of a leader that will just look at the output and look at, I think, the kids as a means to an end, while I look at the kids as the end. Like,
Yes.
and there's a truth there. Like, sure, you can look good and you get your accolades, and then, guess what? In a couple of years, maybe in a couple of decades, this planet's gonna get hot. We're gonna be gone. You know what I mean? Right? Of course, that's like a very nihilistic approach, but what I'm trying to like allude to here is that, perhaps if the younger generation does what they need to do, and we actually care. That's one mistake that we're not looking as millennials. We're not looking at how we were parented with the always you're doing amazing, bro, and like, here's a little certificate for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. The
The
consolation prize, or like
consolation
the.
prize, and it's like, you're so great, dude, just for being you. It's like, no, bro. Like, that's why we're in this situation. That's why the leaders of our past, like our past generation, they failed us. They absolutely failed us. But of course, I think failure was inevitable, seeing the amount of technology and all that stuff kind of just pop out of nowhere, and we just kind of just got the shit end of the stick. right? And but what my part is like, and just going back to myself, like that's what it looked like, and that's why I'm on this journey to kind of just not blame people, like just focus it inwards. Like I am a Catholic, you're a Catholic, and it comes down to this kind of like Jesus Christ message where it's just like focus on yourself, right? The Buddhists teach it, the Christians teach it,
Judaism teaches it.
Judaism teach it. They all
Islam
teach it that
teaches
like
it.
the
Yeah.
pathway forward is by fixing yourself,
Yeah.
right? And by fixing myself. Anyways, this is a kind of deep dive onto Roy's psyche
But
here.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
You said so many things that really inspire a lot of different thoughts with me. What I really find the most interesting is that you started by saying that you didn't really have a parenting structure in your life that sort of pushed the manly Roy out. But yet you find yourself teaching the younger generation about how to be manly. So there's a weird irony there, right? It's sort of interesting that maybe you do it because you didn't have it, and you feel as though you wish you did have it when you were younger, and now you have an opportunity to give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
So perhaps that's where it comes from, and maybe when you're a father one day, that will bleed through into your child as well.
100%.
My upbringing was not very different. So I'm the younger child. My sister is the definition of like the perfect child.
Yeah.
You know, she's like the perfect human. To be
Yeah.
honest.
Honestly, yeah. No,
You know,
definitely.
she's super kind. She always cares about others. She's super hardworking. She rarely complains about anything.
Yeah.
And like then you have me, and like the ugly duck, right? I don't know if it was a subconscious thing as I was growing up that I could never live up to the expectations of my older sister, but I was also the first boy in the house, and that's a relatively big deal in Italian culture as well. And so there's an expectation from my father that I will always have to improve. It's like that's the only way I can put it. And this is something that I think when a boy becomes a man, he understands this. And I don't think boys have the capacity to understand what it means. Like, see, growing up, it was very difficult to have a conversation with my dad. Well, when I was very young, it was easy because I was very young and kind of naive. But as I got older, in like my teens and 20s, it's like I didn't really know how to communicate with my father because I always felt as though it was like constantly a message about like you're not doing it good enough, you got to do it better. Like that was like the repeated message that just constantly I hear in my head. When I think of my father, I think of him telling me how I can do it better. Period. It doesn't matter what task it is that I'm doing. And so I did have that manly father structure in my life where it was, sort of imposed on me that you have to be responsible, you have to do your thing. He showed me how to use tools, he showed me how to build things around the house. I kind of took it for granted then. I regret now not participating more in it and taking it more seriously. But again, this is what I mean. I think boys don't have the capacity to understand the value of these things. And this is the journey. It's learning to appreciate these elements of life.
Yeah.
Because again, I was, in my early teens, I'm going to be rich and I'm going to be able to do this and I'm going to have a fancy car. And, I'm a relatively intelligent person. So, and like not trying to boost myself or anything like that. But like school was easy for me. I got good grades. It was really, really easy. And I developed this like, oh, life's going to come easy. I'm going to be able to get all these things. No problem. I don't,
Yeah.
But I didn't appreciate that it requires hard work to get these things. You can be as smart as you want. It's not going to get you to the finish line. It's only going to get you started in the race. Your legs got to run still. You know what I mean? You still have to put the work in. And that was something that took a really long time for me to recognize. And I went through my high school career just breezing through it because, let's face it, high school, if you're a relatively intelligent person, is easy. The test questions are straightforward. But then you get to university, and university starts to put this challenge on you. And I found that the most interesting change in dynamic from high school to university, it wasn't even the difficulty of the material. It was the independence that the university provides to their students that you don't get. In high school, you're still being coddled.
They're being coddled.
And that's like horribly dangerous.
Horrible.
And this is what I'm referring to in terms of the issues that we have today that I think when our parents and maybe their parents were in school, if they
Mm-hmm.
even went to school, a lot of them dropped out of school in like grade 8, grade 9.
Mm-hmm.
Like school wasn't a priority back then, right? And I think that this revelation of like making it a priority and has its consequences because there's a lot of coddling that happens
Mm-hmm.
in the education system. And then you get to university and there's like this hybrid reality where it's like, okay, yeah, we're no longer going to coddle you. You know, we're not going to hold your hand. We're not going to spoon feed you. You're going to have to do the reading on your own. You're going
Yeah.
to have to do well in the tests. You know, we're not going to boost your
Yeah.
grades and maybe you fail. But guess what? The consequence of failing is nothing really. You just failed. You can do it again.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
whereas,
one thing I just want to add here is
sure,
like, and just kind of like comparing them both. Like women in high school were very obedient for the most part when it came to doing your work. It's kind of a, but one part that I am very fascinated about is like boys, right? You know, do we want boys to be like obedient like that? You know, it takes a special like kind of teacher to even teach some of the boys. Like, you know, I have family members who got like 8% in physics, right? You know, that's how disobedient they were, and they're extremely successful today. You know, um, I don't know, like just even when I think of it, it's just like I used to be that boy who was like following the rules and just doing everything and just trying to please the teachers and all that, but it didn't do anything for me.
right.
It's only till I started like breaking the rules that I was able to break out of this kind of old Roy 1.0.
So that's fascinating to me because I also think that an element of the on the journey to manhood
Yeah.
is venturing into the unknown. And
Yeah.
like for us, you know, growing up in a very structured suburban life, there's rules for everything.
Rules.
And you know,
Yeah.
yeah, and you don't really get the opportunity if you're a kid that listens to his parents. You don't really get to go into these unknown places.
No.
And I think that in order to really get to manhood, you definitely have to break some rules.
You have to break the
You know,
rules.
you got you have to see what's on the other side of the fence. You need to explore that territory.
Yeah.
It's important to come back to the safety that you were in before, but you do need to have that experience because experience translates into wisdom.
Yeah.
And like everybody looks to the older generations for wisdom, right? And the
Yeah.
reason why they do that is because they've done it. You know,
Yeah.
they've done a lot of this stuff, and you know, just to kind of like close off the finishing of the stuff, the telling of the story of the transition for me from
Sure.
university
Yeah.
to real life. The final step, of course, is jumping in. Well, not the final step, but the next step is jumping into the work world. And you know, if you carry forward a mentality of I'm just going to rely on my intelligence to float me through, if you didn't learn that lesson in university, you sure as fuck are going to learn it when you go into the work world,
Mm-hmm.
because people don't respect you just because you're smart. People require you have to earn respect through different
Results.
results,
Yeah.
and results are usually achieved through hard work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Dedication, hard work, that kind of stuff. And these are now the principles. So by the time you get to that stage in your life where you're the working man,
Yeah.
um, you start to kind of connect the dots between the messages that your father had, or for me, the messages that my father had preached to me when I was younger, where I kind of just like dismissed them and didn't take them seriously.
Yeah.
I didn't consider them in my calculation for my ambitions.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know, as I get older and next step and next step. So, you know, my next step after the working world was the marriage world and
Right.
having a child. And like that for me was like obviously the most recent step. And man, I can't tell you how many times in a day or a week or a month I I can visually see exactly what my dad was trying to say
Yeah.
to me then. And you know, that to me represents some form of acknowledgement that I have now transitioned into manhood.
Right. So
Right.
I want to like really pick apart that like you broke the rules and then you came back and you acknowledged the tropes and cliches that we've been just fed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, that's the process. Like for a boy, that's a healthy process. It's like break the fucking rules, destroy them,
Yeah.
and just destroy just like you have a bunch of you know, with my ex, there was she had a little kid, right? And I bought him some blocks, and everything he did was, once again, I think we talked about this at the beginning, destroying.
Yeah,
He would build them
destruction.
up, and I would say, hey, listen, no, just like let's just build it up. Look what you can build. So he would build it up, and then he would look at it, and like there's something, he just starts like something in him just starts like jingling, and then he just destroys it all.
Rips all
He
apart.
rips it all. I'm like, come on, man, let's do it again. But once again, that's like a healthy process. You destroy like the rules, and you go out. Obviously, you don't want to die or cause anyone else like serious irreparable kind of harm,
Sure.
but you come back and then you acknowledge the rules that your parents have been giving you like the whole time. It's different from doing everything just like when we were in high school, and I think we had this very similar kind of like path and this storyline where we just did everything they wanted us to do, and we
Mm-hmm.
were obedient and submissive, and we were no threat. You know, there was no. When you look at Simba, Simba goes into the dark, the valley of the bones, and he comes back, you know, as like a man.
Yes.
You know, um, when you look at, you can start listing every single male hero out there.
There's always that journey.
That journey into, like, you look at Batman. He rich dude. I mean, it's just a regular boy, but it got forced upon him, right? And at some point you have to crack and then venture off into the dark side and come back.
Well, I really like the Lion King one
Yeah.
because I'll tell you, it's not just that he ventures off into the dark lands.
Yeah.
He also
Disobeyed
meets
the king.
Timon and Pumbaa,
Yeah.
and like they are the perfect representation of like
Your boys.
like let's just not give a shit.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Let's just do whatever we want,
Yeah.
and that's perfect because then it was like a moment in his life where he got an opportunity to actually explore on his own will and test what he liked and didn't like, and that was part of his journey into manhood, right?
Yeah.
Like so. I actually never really looked at Lion King as being the storytelling of boy to man transition,
Yeah.
but it really is.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah, it is.
And there's lots of parts of it, like, and it's been definitely covered out on the internet. Like, everyone has their little psychoanalysis of it, but like, even Nala comes back, and she's literally like, "Fuck the boys." Like, Simba's like, "Fuck the boys. I'm going with her." You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
And
yes.
it's just like, it just shows that, like, okay, it's like, bro, I thought you had some responsibility, like, you know what I mean, but I guess not. And like, it starts to kick in. It's like, oh, responsibility is kind of sexy. Like,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Given it's the right stage and you've gone through the right, his whole world was like disrupted, and he left and he caused his father's death and whatever it is, right?
But like, look at the synergy of our species, because you look at a teenage girl, she doesn't find responsibility attractive.
Mm-mm.
Right? She respects the bad boy. She
Yeah.
respects the bad boy who's breaking the rules, and in that phase.
Mm-hmm.
But as she matures, she then looks to find a responsible partner.
Right.
So that I find fascinating, because obviously we sort of go on a journey concurrent to each other, and their interests sort of align in their timeline with
Right.
with our, you know.
Yeah,
this
that's
is
fascinating. So, like, okay, and obviously we're not like scientists and we're not studying the statistics, but we're just using our intuition and we're looking at our own observations, and like, because our journey has been lengthened at a certain stage, which is like the education part, people are spending a lot more time. That's delaying us. I feel that's delaying men in general. And then on the other side, we were just talking about online dating, right? So it's like, now what's happening there? You know what I mean? So, our journey is not coinciding with the journey of women. And
100%.
it's not the same. Like, that's one thing I want to like really put up. We don't have the same. It's not equal. Like, we have different journeys. Like, and it's just, that's the way it is, right?
I think that today more failed relationships are happening in the age group of like 21 to 25.
Yeah.
Because I find that the women are reaching a state of maturity before the men are.
Yeah.
And they're just looking at men who are their age, or I should call them boys,
Mm-hmm.
because for all intents and purposes for our discussion, that's what they are at that age in their life. And they're looking at their 23-year-old boyfriend or 22-year-old boyfriend, and they're like, you're a fucking joke.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a man with responsibility.
Yeah.
But boys nowadays, at 22, 23 years old, don't understand that yet.
No.
They don't pick that up until their late 20s, early 30s.
Because who's giving it to them? They have to learn it on a case by case basis.
Right.
Like, while in previous iterations of our, our society,
Mhm.
it's just like there was a definite path. Like,
Well,
one of
because
those-
it was trial by fire, Roy. So,
Yeah.
like, you had to go to work at 19,
right?
right? So you had to learn what it meant to have responsibility at
Yeah.
work at 19. Now, you go to work after you finish university.
Mhm.
So you start that process 4 to 5 years, to 7 to 8, depending on what you do in school, years later. So how could you really learn to appreciate that same responsibility that your parents did
Yeah.
when they left high school? Right?
Yeah.
And like their parents probably didn't even go to high school. And they were working on the farms at the age of 14.
Yeah.
So they were understanding responsibility even younger.
Yeah.
Right? So like people were going through this journey a lot faster.
And that's just like, we're talking about Western men, raised
Yes,
and born
yes,
here.
of course.
Because, even when our partner here, he came from India, right? And he came from India, and he had to, it was a hard living there. He didn't want that type of life at like 18 years old, 19 years old. He came here, he got like an education permit to study here, and he liked it here, and he got his own place and all stuff at 19.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At 19.
Yeah.
So-
if I told you what I was doing at 19, it's a laughing stock in comparison.
When those guys look at us, they're like, you guys are just wasting it.
Yeah.
You guys are just wasting it. Mind you, there's a lot more time for really great ideas to be incubating and more experience with play for us. But is it worth what we're giving up and what we're sacrificing? That's my question, because at 19, if we weren't playing, perhaps we wouldn't even come up with this podcast. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, and or come up with greater ideas, or we're starting this media brand or whatever you want to call it here, and we've got moving parts. We've got other projects than just Risky Thoughts, graphic design, merchandise, stuff like that, and people are actually liking it. But maybe we wouldn't have tried something so outside the realm of construction. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
like my daily tasks are. It is very, because maybe this is something that we can explore, because we are getting a little late into this recording now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
One possible future topic that we can explore is like the correlation between this extended jovial years
Yeah.
to innovation, in
Yeah.
the world. I think that there's no questioning that innovation in the world is uncontrollably growing.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's a function of this. I wonder if there's like some psychological ties to the fact that we're spending more years being, I don't know, imaginative in the spaces
Yeah.
that we are, versus being more practical and working at younger ages.
Yeah.
Very interesting topic to explore.
Yo, we came up with freaking Uber Eats like.
I know, let's not even go there, because the number of ideas that we
No,
had.
Exactly. I know, man. We just figured we're gonna create a podcast here where people can get some good ideas to make some great inventions. That was one of the reasons we made it.
We're gonna get royalties on anybody that's listening to this that gets inspired
Right?
by it. So,
no, for sure.
what I want to conclude with just very quickly is I want to ask you what your answer to this question is, and then I think I'll share my answer as briefly as possible. But in discussing the journey of manhood or boyhood transitioning into manhood, if you had to provide any advice to a boy at the age of 9, a boy at the age of 18, and call it boy at the age of 25, what advice would you give each one of those individuals?
Oh my god, that's a tough question, man. Because I have me, like I have to cater an exact response, and it obviously depends to who.
There's got to be some generic things though that you would want a 9-year-old.
like an 18-year-old.
We'll start with a 9-year-old. Like, what would you tell a child?
Oh my god, 100%. And this is it's as boring as it sounds. It's like you're gonna be learning coding. Like, you better freaking know how to manipulate these machines.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like it's probably the biggest existential threat we know, like technology.
Yes.
And if you don't know, just like us, like I know you can do a little programming, but we're archaic when it
Yeah,
comes
we
to
are
that,
in
right?
comparison. Yeah.
And in not knowing how this like these software related things work, you're screwed.
Okay, and what about the 18-year-old?
18-year-old
We'll just say teenager for that matter.
teenager. Okay.
What's the most important thing for a boy going through his teenage years to know?
Uh, you need to pick up as much responsibility as possible, and you need to start learning like yesterday, you know, um, and articulating it like that, not like you got to do this, you got to do that, you know, you got to get your shit in order. No, no, no. It's just like you need to learn to pick up responsibility, and it's what's gonna make you the alpha in the group.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
the 25-year-old?
Oh, the 25-year-old. So that's closer to now our age, right?
Get in there.
Not really. We're pretty old. Um, the 25-year-old. The 25-year-old.
What do you tell the 20-year-olds that work at that place?
Yeah.
I mean, you taught them about handshakes and you taught them
Yeah.
about all these things. But if you had to sum that up into a nutshell and into a sentence, what would your wisdom for them be?
It was like pretty much it's sacrificing, and I always open up with that. I know you and what you're thinking. You're gonna be rich. I'm gonna tell you the truth. You're not. Like, and honestly, like because every boy thinks the same way. Every boy thinks the same way. All of them.
Interesting.
They all think at some point, unless if you're not like neurotypical, but most neurotypical boys are just gonna be like, you know, I'm gonna kill it. I'm gonna be like flashing. I'm gonna be on a yacht and all that stuff because that's what they see.
Yeah.
That's what they idealize.
Yeah. And that's another topic for another
Yeah, that's
day.
another topic. But yeah, anyways,
So-
so 25-year-old, I don't know, man. Like it's like he's just as fucked as the rest of us. You know, like
That might be a message that you can tell them.
yeah,
I think if I had to give a very quick statement to a 9-year-old, a teenager, and a young 20s to mid 20s, the 9-year-old, I would say play as much as you can. Don't be afraid to break bones. Don't be afraid to do anything. Be fearless. That's what I would tell a 9-year-old, because I think it's the most important time of their life to experience. The teenager, I would certainly tell them to humble themselves. I think that's a very important thing, because I think the cockiness of teenage boys is like out of control because their hormones are all over the place.
yeah,
So I would definitely start by humbling them by saying you're not as good as you think you are,
yeah,
and you don't know nearly as much as you think you do. So be humble. And I think the 20-year-old or the person in their 20s, the boy in their 20s, my words would be, you're not working hard enough. You need to work harder. I think you need to understand that everything that you've gone through in your life is just the beginning, and you're turning a corner into the real world, and it's going to slap you in the face if you don't learn to work hard. Those would be my messages for the 3 different generations. So
true.
I think maybe we conclude with that, and I don't know if you have anything to add to the end of that, but I'm good.
No, I just want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll see you on a next episode of Risky Thoughts.
Take care, everybody. Have a good night.